The Springboks have done it again, against all odds, with 14 men for an entire second half in the cauldron of the Stade de France. Rassie Erasmus watched his world champions deliver one of their most remarkable performances in recent memory. The final score, 32-17, in favor of South Africa. But the numbers alone don't tell the story of what unfolded in Paris on that historic Saturday night. This wasn't just any victory. This was a win built on sacrifice, intelligence, and the kind of grit that has become the hallmark of Erasmus's Springboks. When Lou de Jager received a controversial red card on the stroke of halftime, many thought the game was over. France, playing at home with the crowd behind them and an extra man for 40 minutes, seemed destined to extract revenge for that heartbreaking one-point loss in the World Cup quarterfinal just 2 years ago. But Erasmus had other plans, and so did his players. In the post-match aftermath, with emotions still running high and the roar of the French crowd slowly fading into disappointed murmurs, Rassie Erasmus stood before the media and revealed the tactical brilliance and human sacrifice that made this victory possible. His words painted a picture of a team that understands what it truly means to play for the jersey, for each other, and for something bigger than individual glory. The most telling moment of Erasmus's reflection came when he spoke about the decisions made at halftime. With de Jager sent off and the team facing an uphill battle, the coaching staff had to make some brutal calls, and none was more difficult than the decision involving Captain Siya Kolisi, who was playing his 100th test for South Africa. Imagine being told in your 100th game, a milestone that most players only dream of reaching, that you need to come off the field. Not because you've played poorly, not because you're injured, but because the tactical situation demands it. Erasmus explained it with a mixture of admiration and respect in his voice. They needed Andre Esterhuizen on the field, a player versatile enough to slot into both the loose forward position and the center depending on whether they had a scrum or a line-out. It was the kind of chess move that only makes sense when you're a man down and every decision matters. When they told Kolisi, the captain didn't argue. He didn't complain. He just took it on the chin and understood. That moment, Erasmus suggested, encapsulated everything about this Springbok team. The willingness to put the collective above the individual. The understanding that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the right thing to do. But Kolisi wasn't the only one asked to make a sacrifice. Damian de Allende, who had been playing exceptionally well, was also substituted. There was no performance-related reason for the change, but with the tactical reshuffle needed to accommodate playing with 14 men, de Allende's number was called. Like his captain, he accepted the decision without hesitation. These weren't just substitutions. They were acts of selflessness that spoke to the culture Erasmus has built within this squad. A culture where ego takes a backseat to strategy, where personal milestones matter less than team success, where every player understands their role in the bigger picture. The tactical adjustments didn't stop there. Manny Libet came on, and Sacha feinberg-mngomezulu, the young fly-half who had started the match, moved to fullback. It was a seamless transition that worked beautifully, showcasing the depth and versatility that Erasmus has been building throughout his tenure. Everyone, the coach noted, had a good impact on the game, but that impact came from the players' understanding that this was a 23-man effort. In their case, it was all 34 guys on tour contributing to the victory. Erasmus was quick to credit his coaching staff for the halftime plan that made everything possible. When you're down to 14 men against a team like France, in their own backyard, with a hostile crowd baying for your blood, you need more than just heart. You need intelligence. You need a plan. And the Springbok coaches delivered exactly that. The philosophy was clear, and Erasmus articulated it perfectly. The guys who started probably softened up the opposition a little bit, and the bench came on to finish it. It's the bomb squad mentality that has become legendary in world rugby, but on this night, it took on an even deeper meaning. With one less man on the field, the impact of the substitutes became even more crucial. Fresh legs, fresh minds, and fresh energy when France expected the Springboks to tire. But beyond the tactics and the substitutions, what stood out in Erasmus's post-match reflections was his emphasis on composure under pressure. This was, he said, one of their most composed away performances in recent years. Think about what that means. The Springboks have played in some of the most hostile environments in world rugby. They've faced the All Blacks in New Zealand, the Wallabies in Australia, England at Twickenham. Yet this performance, with a man down in a stadium packed with passionate French supporters, ranked among their most controlled displays. The statistics heading into the match had suggested this would be a knife-edge affair. The last 3 Springbok victories over France had come by margins of just 3 points. The 2022 French win had been by 4. Everything pointed to another nail-biter, another game that would come down to a single moment, a referee's call, a bounce of the ball. And while the final margin of 15 points might suggest otherwise, those who watched the game knew just how close it had been for long stretches, especially in that second half when France had the numerical advantage. France had won the most turnovers per game of any Tier 1 side going into the match. South Africa had conceded the most. The French lineout was operating at an incredible 95% success rate. The Springbok lineout was the weakest in international rugby at 85%. On paper, with an extra man, France should have dominated. But rugby isn't played on paper, and the Springboks proved once again that statistics mean nothing when you have the heart, the plan, and the will to win. This victory carried extra weight for multiple reasons. It wasn't just about beating France. It wasn't just about Kolbe's 100th cap. It was also Rassie Erasmus's 50th test as head coach of the Springboks. 50 tests, 2 World Cup victories, multiple rugby championship titles, a series win over the British and Irish Lions. The man has already cemented his legacy as arguably the greatest Springbok coach of all time, and nights like this in Paris only add more weight to that claim. In the lead-up to the match, Erasmus had been his usual mix of humility and psychological savvy. When France coach Fabien Galthy had called the Springboks maybe the best team ever, Erasmus had responded cautiously, hoping it was an honest compliment but wary that it might be a ploy to release pressure on the French players. He'd praised France's depth, their development of young players, their similar approach to what South Africa was trying to do in building for the future. But when the final whistle blew and the Springboks had secured another famous victory on French soil, there was no need for mind games or psychological warfare. The performance had spoken louder than any words could. The sacrifice, the intelligence, the resilience, the sheer bloody-mindedness of refusing to be beaten even when the odds were stacked against them. Erasmus spoke about how France had absorbed relentless pressure. But in reality, it was the Springboks who had done the absorbing. Wave after wave of French attacks in that second half, with the extra man, with the crowd roaring them on, with revenge for the World Cup quarterfinal within their grasp. But the Springbok defense held firm. They didn't just survive, they thrived. And when the opportunities came, they finished strongly, scoring 19 unanswered points to turn the game on its head. The scrum became a weapon. With France expecting the Springboks to struggle with one less man, the South African pack instead dominated, winning crucial penalties and providing the platform for the victories. The maul, another traditional Springbok strength, became unstoppable. Andre Esterhuizen's try from a rolling maul was a thing of beauty, a perfectly executed set piece that France simply couldn't stop, despite having the numerical advantage. And then there was Grant Williams, the replacement scrum half, who threw a dummy, found space, and scored a crucial try that effectively sealed the victory. These were the moments that Erasmus had spoken about. The ability to win the big moments. The capacity to stay calm when everything around you is chaos. The understanding that in test match rugby, especially against the very best teams, it's not about playing perfect rugby for 80 minutes. It's about being good enough when it matters most. For Kolbe, despite the disappointment of being substituted in his milestone match, the victory made everything worthwhile. This was his 100th test, a journey that began in the townships of South Africa and led to him becoming the first black captain to lift the Webb Ellis Cup twice. His leadership, even from the sideline in the second half, was instrumental in keeping the team focused and united. The captain who understood that sometimes the best thing you can do for your team is accept a decision that hurts personally but helps collectively. As Erasmus reflected on the performance, there was a sense not just of satisfaction but of validation. This was a team that had been criticized at times for rotating too much, for experimenting too frequently, for not settling on a best 15. But the depth that those rotations had built, the versatility that the experimentation had created, the understanding of roles that came from giving different players opportunities, all of it came together in Paris when it mattered most. The victory also carried significance for what lies ahead. With Ireland and Italy still to come on this tour, the Springboks had laid down a marker. They'd shown that even in the most difficult circumstances, even when the chips are down and the odds are against them, they know how to win. That's the kind of confidence that can carry a team through an entire season, through a World Cup cycle, through the pressure moments that define champions. Erasmus was careful to spread the credit around. He talked about the 34 guys on tour, not just the 23 who got their names on the team sheet. He praised the coaching staff for their halftime plan. He honored the sacrifice of players like kolbe and allende who put the team first. He highlighted the impact of the bench players who came on and finished the job. It was a masterclass in leadership, acknowledging that great victories are never about one person, but about a collective effort. The atmosphere in Paris that night had been electric, hostile, intense. The kind of pressure cooker environment that can break teams, that can expose weaknesses, that can turn dreams into nightmares. Erasmus knew what to expect. He'd been there before in various capacities, and he'd warned his players about the passion and intensity they would face. The whole cauldron, as he called it, that makes playing in France such a unique and difficult challenge. But his team had risen to the occasion. They'd taken everything France could throw at them, absorbed the pressure, stayed disciplined, executed the plan, and emerged victorious. It was the kind of performance that builds legacies, that gets talked about for years, that becomes part of the folklore of South African rugby. As the dust settled on this remarkable victory, Rassie Erasmus could look back with pride not just on the result, but on what it represented. A team that understands sacrifice, players who put the collective above themselves, a coaching staff that can adapt and overcome, a culture that values resilience, intelligence, and unity above all else. The Springboks had beaten France before, including that heart-stopping World Cup quarter-final. But this victory, achieved with 14 men for 40 minutes in one of rugby's most intimidating venues, might just rank among the finest in the Erasmus era. And for a coach who has already delivered so much, who has already written his name into South African sporting history, that's saying something. The final image was of a team celebrating together, a coaching staff embracing, a captain who had sacrificed his milestone moment for the greater good, joining in the joy. This was what Rassie Erasmus had built. Not just a rugby team, but a brotherhood. Not just world champions, but a group of men who understood that true greatness comes not from individual glory, but from collective achievement. And as they prepared to face the next challenge, to continue their tour, to build toward future battles, one thing was clear. The Springboks under Rassie Erasmus had once again shown the world what makes them special. It's not just the skill or the physicality or the tactical nows. It's the heart, the sacrifice, the willingness to do whatever it takes, whoever it affects, to get the job done. That night in Paris, they had done exactly that. And in doing so, they had delivered another chapter in the remarkable story of South African rugby under the guidance of a coach who understands that the greatest victories are the ones built on sacrifice, intelligence, and an unbreakable spirit.